What up, fam? Okay, this is just a recap of Act 2 for Romeo and Juliet, in case anybody is wondering or wants a little bit more information about what went down in Act 2. So, let's go. So we start off in Act 2, Scene 1, okay? It's like maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. They just had the massive party, and Romeo and Juliet met for the first time. They kissed, it was amazing, and they're madly in love. So, Benvolio and Mercutio take Romeo out of the party, and Romeo splits. All right, everybody's leaving the party, and Mercutio and Benvolio are looking around for Romeo. They think he went back over the wall to the Capulets' house, but they can't find him anywhere. So start of Act 2 is they're looking around for him, trying to see where he's at and making fun of him. They're like, oh my gosh, he probably found Rosalind and they're hooking up. That's great for him, but he needs to get over himself. So they're really upset. They finally end up giving up on him, and Romeo's like, they don't know what I'm feeling like. They don't even know what it's like to be in love. This is another thing to keep in mind as we go through this, okay? Who knows what information? So Mercutio and Benvolio have no idea about Juliet. Nobody knows about Juliet. We know about Juliet because we're paying attention, but they don't know, okay? And Romeo hasn't told them about the situation, so that's very key. Okay, Scene 2. This is gonna take a while, so bear with me. This is one of the most famous scenes in all of dramatic literature, okay? So Romeo hops over the fence. He's complaining that Benvolio and Mercutio don't really know what they're talking about, and he's stalking the Capulet house looking for Juliet, right? He has no idea. He just so happens to be like creeping major stalker status in the bushes at the house, all right? This is a big deal. All of a sudden, a light comes on in like one of the balcony rooms, and Juliet comes out. Now, Juliet is probably out of her like party garb. She's probably in her like pajamas or underwear or anything that like, you know, you hang out in your sweats and you're like, I don't want to see the love of the love of my life to see me in these things. So she's probably all undone all of her stuff. And Romeo's like, oh my gosh, there she is. Should I tell her I'm here? Nah, I'ma wait and just listen to see what she has to say. Stalker. Juliet is up there talking to herself, as you do when you've just had this amazing experience and you're 14 years old. So she's talking to herself about this guy that she's met. She's so excited, and she's like, I can't believe that he's a Montague. It's the worst situation possible. So and Romeo's sitting here like, oh my gosh, she thinks I'm hot. She thinks I'm wonderful. I'm just gonna keep listening, even though she doesn't know that I'm there. So all of a sudden, Romeo like speaks up randomly, and Juliet's like, hello, random person in my backyard who is not introducing himself. Who the hell are you? And Romeo's like, girl, don't even worry about it. I'm not gonna be anybody. Like, I'm exactly who you want me to be. And she's like, okay, not helpful. Who are you? And he's like, you don't even need to worry about it. And she's like, wait a second, your voice sounds like you're Romeo. You're Romeo, right? And he's like, maybe, unless you really don't like Romeo. So Juliet says, okay, how did you get here? The walls are high. So remember, during this time, it's the 1400s in Italy. During this time, these aristocratic households would be like fortresses, okay? So they would not only have this giant mansion, it's like Bachelor Nation mansion style. Like you've got like these huge walls that are around these giant manor houses. So she's like, how did you get here? The walls are high, like, and difficult to climb. And he's all like, don't even worry about it, girl. Love gave me wings and I flew over them. And she's like, okay, good for you. But literally, how did you get here? And he's like, don't worry about it. And she's like, okay, if my family sees you, they will kill you. And he's like, love is gonna like create an armor around me. Babe, you don't even have to worry about it. And she's like, okay, love's all good, but they will literally kill you. Romeo suggests, he's like, don't worry about it. I'm gonna change my name if that's what you really want. And she's like, oh my gosh. He goes into this long explanation about how pretty she is and how much he loves her. And she's like, oh my gosh, okay, like you're so cute. And she is sitting here with this very modest demeanor. She's probably in like her nightgown or pajamas or like things that she doesn't necessarily want anybody to see her in. And so she's sitting up there saying, oh my gosh, I'm really glad that it's dark because I'm blushing from how much you're showering on me and how beautiful you're making me sound. I'm not really that pretty. And he's like, shut up. Yes, you are. While he's spouting all of these like rhymes and metaphors and similes, she's like, okay, thank you, that's really beautiful, but I think that this is happening too quickly. I mean, how is that possible? That like we love each other so much, that our connection is so strong, like so immediately. This is not like Bachelor or Listen to Your Heart or Love is Blind. Romeo is trying to convince Juliet that like, no baby, I love you. I swear by the moon that I love you. And Juliet's like, you idiot. Why would you swear on something that is constantly changing and going up and down? And he's like, I thought it was romantic. Okay, what should I swear by? And she's like, don't swear by anything, because that just means that there's the possibility that you could break my heart, and that would be even worse. And he's like, girl, you gotta help me here. I'm trying to be romantic. I'm trying to be all the things. She says, okay, let's wait. Let's see how this plays out. We'll like figure out how to like send messages to each other. Let's slow it down. And she starts to leave. And he's like, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? Now you can interpret that to mean lots of different things. However, she comes back and she's like, what can I possibly give you tonight? Remember, this is a staunchly Catholic society, okay? Italians in the 1400s were very drenched in Catholicism, okay? So this idea of sex before marriage, or this idea of marrying somebody without being in the church, or this idea of sexual immorality for women, let's be honest, was a really big deal during this time, okay? So she's like, let's slow this down, and he's like, I need some satisfaction, and she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What kind of satisfaction can I give you tonight? And he's like, you didn't tell me that you loved me. And she was like, oh, you silly boy. I told you that I loved you way back when, in all of this understatement and all of this subtext. And he's like, perfect. Okay. Nurse starts to yell and like call for Juliet while she's in the middle of this. So they, in a lot of versions, it doesn't say so in the script, but in a lot of versions, this is the part where they kiss some more, or they have this very intimate embrace or something like that. And the nurse keeps calling and distracting them. Okay. So that Juliet's like, okay, fine. Here's the situation. If you are being true about the situation and you want to marry me, then tomorrow I'm going to send somebody to you and you guys are going to talk about the details of the situation. All right. If you're really serious about getting married and like wanting all of this, all right, then we're going to need to go about it the right way. So she goes inside and Romeo's left super sad. And he's like, I can't believe that I have to be here, or I have to leave her. This is such a depressing situation, but it'll be okay. She comes back out and she's like, Romeo, wait a second. I forgot to tell you something. And he rushes back and she just looks at his face and she says, I forgot why I called you back. Because I saw your face, and if it meant that I could see your face some more, I would call you back 1,000 times just so I could see it. And he's like, oh, I mean, come on, like the hopeless romantic in you is just like melt, 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 melt. It's pretty beautiful. They realize that they didn't work out what the plan was going to be tomorrow. So she's like, okay, 9 o'clock. Or Romeo says 9 o'clock is when I'm gonna like meet up. We're gonna be in this area. Tell whoever you're bringing to come and meet me in this spot, and we'll work out the details. Okay? And she's like, yes, that sounds amazing. There aren't a lot of stage directions in Shakespeare's work. So this is again the time where a director might interpret that they kiss again, or they embrace again, or something intimate, and then they leave and they part. And Romeo's like, I'ma go talk to the priest. So scene 3, we get to meet the friar. So the friar is like the pastor of the town. Remember, we are drenched in Catholicism, so every town has a Catholic figurehead. So in this case, it's the friar. He's the priest, he's the pastor, he's the minister, and he's the religious cornerstone of this community. So he's gardening and he's talking about plants and flowers and how dangerous it is. There's lots of like some foreshadowing with it as well. We realize that he's really familiar with herbs, which is going to come back later. Romeo comes into the space and is super, super excited. And the friar's like, oh my gosh, you look like crap. You look like you haven't slept all night. Were you home last night? And then he's like, wait a second. Were you with Rosalind last night? Now, even the implication that the friar says, were you with Rosalind, gives us the impression that Romeo has told the friar about Rosalind before. So we get the impression that the friar and Romeo are really, really close and connected. So Romeo is to the friar what Juliet is to the nurse. So they're very, very close, and Romeo has shared lots of detailed, intimate information about it. So the friar is worried that he has been indulging in sexual immorality, and he's like, were you home last night? And Romeo's like, no, I wasn't home last night. I didn't go to bed. However, I was not with Rosalind. Who the hell is Rosalind? And the friar's like, So Romeo jumps into this huge explanation about how he's in love with another girl. And Friar Lawrence is like, you can't be serious. You literally were just in love with another girl, and now you say you're in love with a new girl? Come on, like, you're not really in love. You know, young love looks with the eyes and not with the heart. And Romeo's like, nah, Friar, this is for real. This is legit. I'm in love with Capulet's daughter. And the friar's like, oh my gosh. So again, the Friar Lawrence is this neutral party, is this neutral person. He's not a member of either family, but he's aware of this like lifetime feud that's been going on. And he's concerned that all of a sudden, the son of a Montague and the son of a Capulet, like, he's aware that this could cause some friction. So he's like, this is unwise. This is not a really great idea. And Romeo's like, no, Friar, I love this woman. We want to get married today. Friar Lawrence is like, okay, you convinced me with like 5 minutes of begging. So he agrees to marry the couple because he's like, wait a second, if I marry them, that automatically will make their families like come together, and then I won't have to deal with all the problems that have been happening in this town because of this flippin' feud. So they agree to get married that afternoon. All kinds of fun. Romeo takes off, get a chance to see Benvolio and Mercutio the next morning, and they're probably a little bit hungover, and they're hanging out talking about Romeo. And Benvolio and Mercutio are like, do we know what happened to Romeo? Did he come back to his dad's house? Like, where did he go? And the boys are like, Benvolio's like, actually, he didn't come home at all last night to his dad's house. In fact, I went over there this morning and they said they hadn't seen him. And not only when I was there, I also saw that there had been a duel challenge that had been sent to Romeo from Tybalt. Okay, so flashback to the party. Remember, Tybalt left the party super angry that Romeo had joined the party and said, this will not go unanswered. He's going to have to pay for this. So Tybalt has sent this duel to Romeo, this challenge that afternoon to like meet up in the town square and like duke it out because of this injustice that was done to his family. So Mercutio is making fun of Romeo, and he's like, oh my gosh, that poor pansy, he's so struck with love, there's no way that he's going to be able to attack Tybalt. And then they have this little like exchange between the two boys, where they're talking about fencing, and they're talking about fighting, and how Benvolio is really quick to get into fights. And we know that Benvolio really isn't the type to get into fights. Remember, if you go back to the very, very first scene, Benvolio was the one who was like, guys, we need to stop fighting. This isn't good. Let's keep the peace in this situation. So these are all key parts to understanding these individual characters. I want to talk for a second about the aristocratic boys during this time, okay? So Romeo is about 17 years old during this, and Benvolio is probably around the same age, like 17 or 18. Mercutio is probably in his 20s, okay? This is just, I mean, we don't know for sure, but we can estimate that that's kind of what's going on. So these boys would have been trained at a very, very young age, in their very privileged lives. They would have been trained in all manners of combat, specifically fencing. So when Tybalt sends out this challenge, everybody, and they start using these fencing terms, everybody knows that and in their circle. And that's a really familiar situation for all of them. Some of them are obviously better at it than others, Mercutio being one who seems very skilled at the sword. So then boys are messing around, goofing off. Romeo comes into the scene, super ecstatic, and Benvolio and Mercutio are like, dude, where did you go last night? Like, what the flip happened? And Romeo's like, oh, well, I'm not gonna tell you. And Mercutio's like, oh, did you, were you with someone last night? And Romeo's like, I may have been, may not have been. And they go into this really vulgar banter, the locker room talk, if you will, about how, like, his night went. He's not sharing any information about Juliet. So the boys still have no idea who Juliet is, and they, like, Romeo's talking in such a crass way that they don't think that it's love anymore. In fact, Romeo is talking about Juliet, or talking about his night out, in the same way that Mercutio was talking about love earlier. Okay, how it's just like a one-night situation and we find and we move on. So now Mercutio and Benvolio are so excited because Romeo is finally back to his old self. He's not moping around on the outskirts of the woods. He is focusing in on what is important in a young man's life. And Mercutio and Benvolio are really excited about that. So the nurse shows up because she's the one that Juliet sent, and she shows up with Peter. Again, this is a time period when it's a patriarchal society. The men are in control of every situation, okay? So rape was really a common occurrence. Sexual assault was a really common occurrence. And so the women were not allowed to travel anywhere alone, let alone if they were aristocratic women like Juliet. So the nurse shows up with Peter, okay? And he's not super important except for the fact that she's got a partner with her, okay? So Peter shows up with the nurse, and the boys make fun of her. They pull her dress up over her face. They are mocking how big she is and how old she is and how ugly she is, and they're doing this to her face. Romeo finally realizes that, oh my gosh, this is the messenger. And so he pushes the boys off and he's like, guys, get the heck out of here. I need to talk to the nurse. So they go away kind of secretly, away from even Peter, and they are having this conversation about Juliet, and the nurse grabs him by the collar. I mean, she doesn't literally, but I like to think she does. She grabs him and she says, hey, if you hurt Juliet, or you are thinking about doing like dangerous things to her, I will hunt you down and murder you. Very much the older brother, you know, very much the father kind of situation. And she's like, if you do that, I will. And Romeo's like, girl, I'm pure. Like, I love Juliet. I want to, like, make an honest woman out of her. I want to get married to her. And the nurse is like, okay, that's fine. So here's the situation. Romeo communicates to her, tell Juliet to come to Shrift this afternoon, okay? Shrift is confessional. So in the Catholic Church, part of part of the process is confessing your sins to the priest. Thereby, the priest then absolves you, and then he is responsible for taking that information and dealing with it with God. So you confess your sins to the priest, and then the priest absolves you of those sins, and you carry on, sin no more, all those fun things. So he is going to confessional, or he says, tell Juliet to come to confessional this afternoon, okay, about 4 o'clock. It would be a very common occurrence for her to go to confessional on a regular basis, a couple times a week. Again, very staunch Catholic religious culture. So he says, tell her to go to Shrift this afternoon, and at Friar Lawrence's cell. And Friar Lawrence's cell is like the side house to the main church. So he goes off, or he says, tell her to go to the Friar Lawrence's cell at about 4 o'clock and go to Shrift, and there I'm going to marry her. And the nurse is crying and she's so excited, and she's like, this is the most happiest day of my life. Do you know that Juliet and I are really close? And he's like, yeah, just go tell her. So scene 4 opens as Juliet is wandering around her garden, just thinking about Romeo, so madly in love with him. She's got this beautiful monologue that she talks about, comparing him with all of these like natural things and how excited she is to be with him. And the nurse shows up, and the nurse is kind of being a little coy about the information. So Juliet's like, what did he say? And the nurse is like, I'm tired. I don't want to, like, I'm just gonna go lay down. And Juliet's like, okay, well, but like, are you gonna tell me the information? And nurse is like, oh, I think I'm hungry. My back hurts. You know how my back really, really hurts. And Juliet's like, oh my gosh, can you please, woman, just tell me what it is? And the nurse is like, fine, if you're gonna be like that, I'm not gonna tell you anything. And Juliet changes her tone and she's like, sweet, sweet nurse, tell me what's going on. And the nurse gets really excited and she says, okay, you're gonna go to Shrift this afternoon. You're gonna go to confessional this afternoon. And there, Romeo's gonna meet you and y'all are gonna get married. Juliet's super excited. She starts to make the plans and off they go. All right, our act ends with the wedding scene, but not really. I'll explain. So Romeo shows up with the friar and the friar's like, settle down. I know you're excited, but remember, violent delights have violent ends. Foreshadowing much? So Juliet then shows up and Romeo and Juliet are obviously super, super excited to get married. And Friar Lawrence is like, y'all need to calm down and settle down so that we can get through this, all right? And Romeo confesses his love once again and Juliet confesses her love once again, and she's so excited about this situation. But here is the kicker, all right? This is really important to understand about Shakespeare. Plays in general and dramatic literature in general, but specifically Shakespeare. We do not have the literal wedding scene in the script, okay? So Shakespeare leaves, and he partially did this like for historical reasons, and for practical reasons during the time of Shakespeare. However, one of the things to keep in mind is that there's a lot of things that can happen on stage that aren't necessarily written in the script, okay? So for a lot of directors, they are going to take the show and they're going to create an interpretation of the show and perhaps add in the wedding scene to create a certain mood or a certain effect. Or they'll take out some scenes in order to negate certain situations that are going on. But it's really key and important to understand these aspects of the literature that we're reading, that there are things that are not said and there are things that are not written into the text that are really important when it comes to stage directions, when it comes to understanding like the story as a whole. So I'll post a few more videos of some interpretations so you guys get a chance to see that. So that's the end of Act 2. Let's go.